So get this. Today we're diving headfirst into real estate. And let me tell you, things are getting seriously interesting.
Oh, tell me about it.
We've got some sources today, some pretty wild stories actually. Wild comparisons from different countries like you wouldn't believe.
And predictions for the U.S. market, too.
You know, predictions that have everybody buzzing.
It's really interesting to see how different the stories are.
Right.
Like, on one hand, you've got all this buzz about these super fancy apartments in India, like luxury apartments,
Right.
and they're comparing those to, like, penthouses in New York City. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you've got all these experts over here in the U.S. saying, whoa, hold on, can people even afford to buy homes? And warning everyone about, like, the risks of some mortgages, you know?
Oh, for sure.
It just goes to show you that real estate is a global thing, and all these trends are connected. Like, what happens in one place affects everywhere else.
Okay, let's just jump right in there.
But let's do it.
With this crazy viral X post, the one that's been blowing up everywhere.
I saw that.
It's from this management consultant, Gurjot Aluwalia.
Okay.
And he's basically comparing a $3 million apartment in Gurgaon, that's in India,
Yeah.
to a $3 million penthouse in New York City.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not about how big they are, you know, square footage and all that.
Right.
It's about what that much money, $3 million,
Yeah.
actually buys you in these different places.
It's a good point, you know, because in Gurgaon, for $3 million, you're talking about a pretty massive, like, multi-bedroom apartment
Oh, wow.
in a luxury building.
Okay.
But in New York, for that same price,
Yeah.
you're lucky to get a penthouse. And even then, it might be tiny.
Crazy.
But hey, at least you might have a killer view, right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's wild when you think about it, like what your money gets you in different places, and it makes you think about the cost of living and what your investment actually gets you in the end.
Yeah. And the reactions to this post have been intense.
Really?
Business Today is saying that some people are actually calling Indian real estate a total scam.
Wow.
Some are even saying it's a bubble about to burst.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, and it gets better. One user even called it daylight robbery.
I mean, it makes you realize how strongly people feel about this stuff, especially in a market like India's. It's constantly changing.
It is.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to understand the bigger picture, right? Like,
Right.
what's driving these crazy high prices in places like Gurgaon?
Right.
Is it all speculation, or is there something else going on, something bigger, like in the economy?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in all the drama.
Yeah.
But understanding what's really going on underneath it all, that's what's important.
Absolutely.
And speaking of understanding, let's switch gears over to the U.S. housing market.
Okay.
You know, the Fed just announced they're cutting interest rates again. And everyone wants to know what it means.
Right.
What does it mean for mortgages and people looking to buy homes?
It's a big deal, for sure,
Yeah.
because a rate cut usually means lower mortgage rates, right? Which can make homes more affordable, and that might make people jump into the market.
Right.
But bank rates saying we need to be careful about these things called ARMs.
ARMers.
Yeah, adjustable rate mortgages.
Oh, hold up. Some of us aren't fluent in real estate speak.
Right.
What exactly is an AR?
So basically an ARM, it's this type of mortgage where your interest rate is fixed for a little while,
Okay.
but then after that it can go up or down depending on what's happening in the market.
Oh.
And those low rates at the beginning, yeah, they sound great, but if those rates go up later, your monthly payments could skyrocket.
Wow.
And that unpredictability, well, that's what makes ARMs kind of risky.
Right.
Especially if you're on a tight budget.
Gotcha. So proceed with caution. ARMs.
Exactly.
Let's fast forward now to like 2025.
Oh.
Forbes Advisor. They're predicting some things about the housing market, and we need to figure out what they mean.
They're predicting that prices are going to grow slower,
Okay.
which sounds like good news for anyone who's struggling to afford a home right now.
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
Okay, I was wondering.
They also think that being able to afford a home is still going to be a big problem.
But if prices are slowing down, why would affordability still be an issue?
It's because of a few things.
Okay.
First, even though prices might not be growing as fast, they're still way high in lots of places compared to how much people make.
Okay, that makes sense.
And second, there's this thing happening, Forbes calls it the lock-in effect.
Okay.
So homeowners who got those super low mortgage rates a while back,
Yeah.
they're hesitant to sell because they don't want to deal with the higher rates now.
Right.
And that means fewer homes for sale, which stops prices from going down much, even if they should.
So it's like buyers are hoping for lower prices, but the sellers are holding tight. They're not budging.
Yeah, like a standoff.
So where does that leave everyone?
It leaves us with a market that's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
With opportunities, sure, but challenges too. And that's what makes all this so interesting. We're trying to make sense of all these forces pulling in different directions, all these different opinions.
Exactly. Well said. And speaking of opinions, Forbes interviewed all these real estate experts, and they all have different ideas about what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Some say now is the time to buy because there's not as much competition.
Okay.
But others are saying, no, wait for rates to drop even more.
Wow.
But then they're like, but be careful because prices might bounce back up.
Yeah.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It's interesting though, isn't it?
It is.
Because there's no one right answer for everyone.
Yeah.
It depends on what your situation is, what you're trying to do.
Right.
Like, are you a first-time buyer, been waiting forever for the right moment to buy? Or are you an investor trying to get the most bang for your buck? Knowing what you want, what's important to you, that's the key.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And speaking of figuring things out, there's this blog post. It's called The Biggest Cliche in Real Estate, and it's about buyers.
Yep.
Buyers who are trying to time their home purchases perfectly.
Yeah.
Like around those rate drops we were talking about.
Really?
What I think is so fascinating is that they're not just sitting around waiting. They're coming up with strategies, like they're playing the game.
So they're looking at what homes are available now, thinking about how much competition there might be later, and they're thinking, okay, I can lock in a good price now and still get that lower rate when it drops.
Exactly.
Smart.
It could be risky,
Yeah.
but it could also really pay off big time.
It definitely shows you how important it is to know what's going on,
Right.
and to be smart, to think ahead.
Yeah.
But before we get too excited, let's take a step back, look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners today?
Well, I think the biggest one is that real estate, it's not a static thing. It's constantly changing. It's always moving. Whether you're looking at India, the US, or anywhere else, there are always these different forces pushing and pulling.
Yeah.
You have to understand those forces,
Yeah.
to make smart decisions.
I agree completely. And the second thing, there's no right answer about whether now is the best time to buy or sell. It all comes down to you, What's your situation? Where are you at financially? What do you want in the long run?
Exactly. And finally, knowledge is power.
Always.
The more you know about the market, the better you'll be able to ride the waves, And trust me, we've got a lot more to explore in this deep dive, so stay tuned.
Lots more to unpack. Welcome back to our deep dive. It's wild how different real estate can look depending on where you are in the world.
It really is. Like, remember that Business Today story about the person who moved from Gurgaon to Chandigarh
Oh, yeah.
because prices were just too high?
Yeah.
It got me thinking.
What's crazy about that story is that it's not just comparing prices,
Right.
This person was saying that in Gurgaon, in that DLF Magnolia's place, prices per square foot are higher than in Dubai,
Wow.
higher than Singapore, even New York City.
No way.
And even with those crazy prices, they were saying the amenities in Gurgaon, nothing special.
It really makes you think about how different things are in different places.
Totally, even within the same country.
And what causes those differences, right?
Right.
Like, is it just supply and demand?
Could be.
Or is there something else going on, like local rules, infrastructure?
Maybe even cultural stuff, like what people want in a home.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly. There's always more to the story. And while we're peeling back those layers, let's go back to those IRMs we were talking about in the U.S. market.
Okay.
I think it's really important to understand the risks there.
Yeah, you said that those low rates at the beginning can be tempting,
Yeah.
but then they can adjust upwards, and that can really throw people off.
That's the thing. Bankrate makes a good point about those low rates making a home look affordable now.
Right.
But if you're not ready for higher payments later, it can really hurt you financially.
Yeah, it's like building a house on sand. It's not stable.
Exactly. So it's not just about the numbers today. It's
Yeah.
about thinking ahead. What if things change?
Right.
And that brings us back to those 2025 predictions from Forbes Advisor.
Go.
Remember, they said that even though prices might be growing slower, affordability is still a big issue.
Yeah, I remember that lock-in effect they talked about. It's like it's creating a bottleneck in the market.
For sure, it's a big factor. Homeowners with those low rates from a few years ago, they don't want to sell and face those higher rates now.
Right.
And that limited inventory, it keeps prices from going down like they might otherwise.
It's like this weird game of musical chairs, but no one wants to give up their seat.
And then to make things even more confusing, Forbes has all these real estate experts with totally different opinions on what's going to happen.
I know. Some say prices will keep going up.
Right, some think they'll drop, maybe even crash in some places.
It's enough to make your head spin, like which way is the market going to go?
It's what makes real estate so exciting and unpredictable.
That's true, but for our listeners who are trying to make sense of it all, what advice would you give them?
Honestly, there's no crystal ball. We can't predict the future, but if you understand the things that are driving the market, you'll be better prepared.
What kind of things?
Things like interest rates, how much inventory there is, how many people want to buy, even global trends like we talked about with Gurgen.
Okay, so it's all about knowledge then.
Knowledge is power, but it's not just about knowing the facts, it's about asking questions, challenging what you think you know.
Okay.
And speaking of challenging what we think we know, let's go back to that blog post, The Biggest Cliche in Real Estate.
Okay.
It talked about these buyers who are trying to time their purchases perfectly, right around those rate drops we were talking about.
Yeah, they're really trying to get the best deal possible.
It goes against the idea that you should just buy whenever, that timing doesn't matter.
But these buyers, they're not just following a trend.
No,
They're analyzing the market, figuring out the risks and rewards.
they're being strategic.
It's actually really smart if you can pull it off.
It definitely shows you how understanding the market and thinking ahead can pay off.
But it's probably not the right move for everyone.
You have to be comfortable with a little risk.
Yeah, and it really helps to have someone experienced to guide you.
Definitely. Speaking of guidance, let's jump over to Canada for a minute.
Okay.
We've got this article from the Financial Post that talks about Canadian mortgages,
Okay.
and they can be pretty different from what we see in the US.
I'm always curious about how other markets work. What are some key things from that article?
One thing they really emphasize is understanding the types of mortgages they have in Canada.
Okay.
Things like insured, insurable, and uninsured mortgages.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have to explain that one for me.
Sure.
What's the difference and why does it matter?
So in Canada, if your down payment is less than 20%, you need mortgage insurance.
Okay.
It protects the lender if the borrower can't pay the loan back.
Right.
Insured mortgages usually come from banks and those traditional lenders.
Okay.
Insurable mortgages are similar, but they come from private lenders.
Okay.
And the terms can be different. And then you have uninsured mortgages for people with a down payment of 20% or more.
Gotcha.
They don't need insurance. These categories, they can affect your interest rate and how much it costs to borrow overall.
So it's really important to understand those differences if you're buying a home in Canada.
Absolutely. The article also talks about what lenders look at when you apply for a loan.
Okay.
Things like your credit score, debt to income ratio, how long you've been at your job.
Makes sense.
It's a good resource if you're trying to figure out Canadian mortgages.
Sounds like it's full of useful information.
It is. And speaking of useful, let's not forget about those hidden gems you can find in real estate.
Oh.
Remember that listing on Vista today, the one for that beautiful cabin in Coatesville, Pennsylvania?
Oh, yeah, the one on 40 acres.
Yes, and that log cabin addition and that porch that wraps around the whole thing.
It sounded so dreamy.
Perfect for anyone who loves being outdoors or wants some peace and quiet.
And the price? $3.2 million? It's not cheap.
All right.
But considering all that land and how unique it is, it seems reasonable.
It reminds you that you can find value in unexpected places.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be the fanciest city or the biggest house.
Sometimes it's about finding a place that feels right, a place that fits your lifestyle.
Exactly. And that cabin in Pennsylvania, it definitely had that feeling.
It did. But let's come back down to earth for a minute, back to those buyers trying to time their purchases around those rate drops.
Okay.
Remember, the blog post mentioned some are even scheduling their closings for December or January, hoping to get those lower rates while there are still good homes available.
That's pretty smart.
They're seeing that rates could drop a whole percentage point by next June, and they're realizing there will be more competition later, so they're saying, let's lock in a good price now and get the lower rate when it comes.
It's like they're playing 4D chess with the housing market.
Right. It's a smart strategy if you can pull it off.
Yeah, it takes a lot of understanding and a willingness to take a risk.
It does. And while it might not be for everyone, it shows you that there are different ways to reach your real estate goals.
It's all about knowing your options and making decisions that work for your situation.
Exactly. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from international comparisons to market predictions to those strategic buying tips.
We have, and we've only just scratched the surface.
But don't worry, we're not done yet.
Yeah.
In part 3, we'll look at some more insights from our sources, including what's happening with foreclosures.
Okay.
And we'll tackle the age-old question, Is now the time to buy or sell?
Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion of our real estate deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've traveled all over, from Gurgaon to Coatesville, looked at everything from those crazy expensive apartments to that cozy cabin, and now it's time to tackle the big questions.
Ones that are probably on everyone's mind.
Exactly. And in this last part of our deep dive, we're going to dig into some things that could really affect your decisions about real estate, starting with foreclosures.
Okay.
It's a topic that always gets people worried.
Yeah, for sure.
And rightfully so. But Forbes advisor is saying it's not as simple as it seems.
Right.
They said that foreclosures have actually been going down lately,
Okay.
which is good news. But they also said they could go back up in the future.
So it's like a mixed bag.
Yeah, lots of moving pieces. So what's keeping those foreclosure numbers down right now?
One big thing is that homeowners have more equity in their homes now compared to the last time the housing market crashed. So if they start having trouble paying their mortgage, they have options. They could use that equity to catch up or even sell their house and avoid foreclosure.
So it's like a safety net.
Exactly, gives them a little breathing room. But Forbes also says there are some things to watch out for, some potential problems.
Like what? What kind of red flags should we be looking for?
Well, the economy is always a factor. If things slow down and people start losing their jobs, more homeowners might fall behind on their mortgages.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's the possibility of interest rates going up, like we talked about before.
Right, with those AMs.
Exactly. If rates start climbing, those adjustable rate mortgages could become a real headache.
So even though things seem stable now with foreclosures, we still need to be careful.
Definitely. Now, I bet everyone's wondering, is now a good time to buy or sell?
The million-dollar question, right? And from everything we've talked about, there's no easy answer.
Nope, it all depends. The experts we've looked at have different opinions, but they all agree it comes down to your own situation, what you're trying to achieve. There's no magic formula.
Like a choose-your-own-adventure, but with houses.
Exactly. So for someone who's been trying to buy their first home for years but couldn't afford it, now might be a good time to jump in.
Okay.
There's less competition and prices aren't going up as fast.
But for investors who want to make a quick profit, they might want to be a little more cautious, really study the market trends.
Exactly. And if you already own a home and you're happy where you are, it might be best to just wait and see what happens.
So it's all about knowing yourself, what you can afford, and what you want in the long run.
Exactly. And speaking of the long run, remember to stay informed. The real estate market is constantly changing. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow.
It's like a river, always flowing.
That's why we do these deep dives, to help you understand all the information out there so you can make smart decisions.
And remember, we've only just scratched the surface. There's always more to learn. We want you to keep researching, keep asking questions, and talk to professionals you trust.
Because whether you're buying, selling, or just watching, the real estate world is full of opportunities. And if you have the right knowledge and you think strategically, you can make those opportunities work for you.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the real estate market.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you learned some valuable stuff and feel more confident about navigating this crazy, exciting world of real estate.
Happy house hunting!